digital games for web and mobile and console, along with her partner, Ann Richards. Today, she'll share insights on creating successful mobile games for tiny people who prefer the good stuff without the crust. Please welcome Carla Engelbrecht-Fischer.
Thanks. Hi. So the mobile landscape of lately in kids' apps, as Scott was saying too, is pretty jam-packed right now. And it can basically leave all of us feeling kind of like this. But the good news is that in the sea of shoes or apps that it is, there are some things that we can do that help to make us stick out a bit. And so that's what we're going to talk through. I will warn you, this is normally about an hour-long presentation that I do, so I'm going to book along. And I have cut out some stuff, but I am happy to send you a document that summarizes actually the full talk, which includes a lot of developmental psychology guidelines. We're big proponents of actually knowing your audience developmentally so that you can really address what their particular needs are. And so I'm happy to share that document with you, so don't feel like you need to be writing madly or taking pictures or whatnot. You can sit back and absorb. So with that, we generally work from the premise that kids are very different from adults. And so there's a lot of different things that we can take into account. One of the biggest things is actually planning for a wide range of abilities. And so even though you define like this is a product for 3-year-olds, 3-year-olds themselves can vary massively in what they're able to do. There are ones who are far advanced and ahead of most 5-year-olds. There's kids who are at 3 still doing things that are appropriate for 2-year-olds. And it's all a very normal range. But it means that we have to plan for very wide ranges of abilities. DDR is a great example, actually, though, because it's a product that was made for adults. Many, many people use it in many different ways. And I've seen 2-year-olds running around on a dance pad having a grand old time and the game not really punishing them. So it's just a good it's a good example of thinking about that wide range of abilities while still being specific to your audience. It's also just using iconic, consistent design. The number of times that I've gone into a design project and the artist comes in and they're like, I've got this great, incredible version of the back button, and it's like the most convoluted thing. There's a reason that the green back arrow works. It's iconic, we understand it. Kids have to learn symbols. And so a stop sign is great because a stop sign is a stop sign. We know it everywhere we go. It may vary slightly from place to place, but it's iconic. And so using that design is actually a good thing. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. Large hotspots. And I'm sorry, this image, unfortunately, has gotten pretty degraded. This is from a dissertation research from like 2003 of J.P. Auercade. And he basically was asking adults, 5-year-olds and 4-year-olds, to click on 2 targets that were about 250 pixels apart. And he did it with a mouse, and they clicked on the left yellow box and then clicked on the right red circle, and he tracked the paths. And the adults were like this very clear, very neat path that like hardly varied. The 5-year-olds were like pretty much all over the place. The 4-year-olds, which is what this one is, you can only see like the main chunk of it, but it was pretty much like they were down over here, off up here, and whatnot. It's just brilliant research that's just beautiful for illustrating that like you really got to give them way bigger hotspots than you expect. And to that, actually, there's some really fascinating research that kids are more likely to undershoot targets. And this is true of touch screens especially. So like, if in your world you're going to build a hotspot, it's actually more this like weird bottom-heavy shape because they're coming in essentially too low. It's also really important to make something noticeable and audible happen on touch. And the reason I talk about this is that we, in like 2007, were doing some early iPod Touch designs for kids' games. And we would take them into the field, let kids start playing them, and they would tap on the screen, and when they didn't see anything happen, instead of releasing, they actually pressed harder. So I'm sitting here with a bunch of kindergartners who are like putting their full body weight onto an iPod Touch screen. It's like, no, we only have so many of those. But what we realized was that we have these conventions with like the mouse where you see a rollover state. When you press, you get this press down state. Suddenly when you've got a hand obscuring that, it's hard to know what's going on. And so you have to change your paradigm a little bit to think about what happens around the finger to giving an audible clue of what's going on. So this is from SoundShaker, which is one of the Tickle Tap apps. And they just do a really nice job of making it clear that you're touching the screen and something is happening. Accidental multi-touch is one of the greatest challenges in kids' games, in developing touchscreens games for kids. Their fingers wander all over the place. They don't have a great body sense. Many adults don't have a great body sense that they're touching the screen too. But for kids, their fingers are wandering all over. They're accidentally triggering things. They're hitting back buttons. They're just turning off, and they're like, it won't work. It's like, well, move your thumb off the screen kind of thing. So what we try to do where we can is leave a safe zone border, knowing that fingers are going to sneak onto the screen. Now, iPhone screens. It's a really tough challenge because now all of a sudden you're cutting down your screen size a lot. So then we try to keep things up toward the top of the screen. That seems to be a little bit safer if there's buttons you don't want them to hit. Or we just try to be smart in the code and try to figure out what's going on with things. Drag and drop is really tough for kids. This is true with a computer mouse, and it's really true on screen. It's great cognitively of like touch here, drag it over here, but maintaining consistent contact with the screen is a huge challenge for kids. That they want to stop, they want to look at where they are because their hand gets in the way and they don't have really a mental model to keep that in mind of what's going on. So they stop, they take their hand off the screen, and some games it punishes them by snapping back to the original position. So you really need to be generous and let them do like progressive movement across the screen. Stop, look at where they're going, move it again, maybe change hands, because also just fatigue can be a factor. Multitouch, swiping, scrolling, the pinch and zoom gestures, these are actually all learned behaviors. They're incredibly innate and smart behaviors that kids pick up really quickly. It's still a learned behavior. And this is one of the things that's really challenging in just talking about kids' games, is remembering that what they see on the screen right there is what they know. They have trouble with this abstract concept that there's more beyond this. This is why scrolling is really hard. They can see words running off or see that like half a picture is there, but they still don't understand fundamentally that they need to scroll up until they learn that behavior. And so these are all things that it's okay to put into games so long as you support the user in learning how to do these things and make the assumption that this could be their first experience with a mobile screen and that you need to teach them these behaviors. Repeating instructions is also incredibly important, and repeating them in a varied way. Kids forget. They forget what they're supposed to be doing. They forget really quickly because most of the time they're not even listening to what the instructions are actually saying. And so repeating it, using a variety of words and phrases, so the like all-important timeout prompt is actually a great thing that you can do for kids. Literacy and eBooks. So eBooks are dominating the kids space right now. And they're gorgeous, and it's awesome, and it's just a great opportunity. And there's some things that we can do with those to really make them all the more effective as reading tools for kids. And so you can model print behaviors like turning pages and reading left to right, that those are important key skills that kids need to learn. And then there's also providing opportunities to go beyond the text. So labeling emotions, predicting events, inferring information, and relating to personal experience. These are things that came from research in the 90s with CD-ROMs and teachers. These are things that teachers said, we want living books. We want these storybooks to do in our classroom to help us do. And it's the same story with mobile apps. That's what they're asking for. They'd like to be able to do these things. And so it's not just about phonics and like word sight recognition and vocabulary. It's actually about the contextual meaning of the pages of the book. So to that, you can support. These are kids who are learning to read. Highlighting the audio, that like karaoke effect, I know it's a pain in the ass to do from a development side of things, but it's really, really important, especially when you're marketing your book as like a learning product or as something that's supporting the literacy experience. That text to audio connection is just amazingly important. And then bells and whistles. We love putting bells and whistles in, right? That's the great thing about doing eBooks is you can add all these amazing animations, but there's actually research that shows that if those animations and interactive elements are not in support of the text, of the purpose and the goal of that page, you can actually take away from the child's comprehension. So you put too many sexy bells and whistles on there, kid's not going to remember what's going on. It's like they're going to remember that Elmo bumped into a wall when it was actually the important thing was that Elmo was growing and he grew so big that he was bumping into walls, right? There's that kind of humor effect kind of thing. So this is from the Lorax. And they just did a beautiful job that like as you click on things, the word would pop up and it would say lamppost, lamppost, lamppost. And you could like repeatedly keep hitting it. It just had this fun little playful effect. This is from the Three Little Pigs app. It's a beautiful app. And the only reason I use it, this is not a like ding against them. It's just when the goal is comprehension, in this particular app, they had a lot of things that were not key to the story. And so like the sun would spin, the squirrel would drop upside down, the owl would fly. There was all these things that would happen that were great, but they weren't in support of the story. And so if your goal is comprehension, then those kinds of bells and whistles are going to distract from the child's experience. Narrative guidelines for preschool, there's a lot of different layers to this, but really preschoolers are the toughest from a narrative structure of like developing a story for them, because they don't understand all these common conventions of flashbacks and replays and dissolves, even dreams. Those are all, again, learned behaviors. Even that transition from a TV episode to a commercial, that fade to black, that's a learned behavior that you learn to understand, that it means that that program is concluded and something else is beginning temporarily. They also focus on the most physically obvious features of their environment. So this is kind of that same effect of the bells and whistles, right? If you want them to be paying attention to the dog that's in the scene, put that dog front and center, not like off in the background. They want those most obvious things. And then they're searching for meaning, but they're really attracted to the vivid production. There's this concept called dialogic reading, which is really the idea that a book is not just a linear experience. You don't just read a sentence in the book, turn the page, read the sentence, turn the page. You actually engage in a conversation with kids when you read a story. You start making predictions. You say things like, oh, what's the dog doing? What's the girl wearing? You just point things out and you talk about it. And there's research that actually helps support children's literacy learning. It helps them learn reading skills. It helps their comprehension, engaging in that dialogue around the text. There's ways to apply this to viewing TV, to playing games, providing those moments to take a break and modeling the behaviors for parents, introducing the places where they can actually do this is a great opportunity with games. It's this opportunity to discuss and to ask questions. There's also, around that idea, there's these great apps starting to come out that are just around editing and creating and making stories. So again, these tend to be more now into the elementary grades and even the tweens and young teens. And they're just great opportunities for sharing, for expressing, and for making and creating stories. Trial and error is the STEM concept, really. So STEM being the science, technology, engineering, math bubble that we're all chasing right now. Right? There's amazing opportunities around that. One of the key features of STEM is actually this mindset that it's not just memorizing facts. It's not just open wide and swallow. Like if you're like me, you probably had to memorize the periodic table of elements when you were in high school. Right? That's an open wide and swallow approach to STEM. Whereas there can be much more of this playful trial and error exploration and curiosity that games are amazing at doing. Angry Birds is actually really great trial and error. Sure, there's lots of different ways to use the system and to win a level. Portal is one of my favorites for just, here's a puzzle, go at it, have fun, and just really supporting that mindset. And Scribblenauts is another great one where the puzzle's actually, it's designed so that you're rewarded for finding multiple solutions to the problems. There's also this fun little trend going on of just being able to embed you as the user into the app, into the stories. So there's Jib Jab, there's Cute as Can Be is another one. My husband would probably kill me to know that he's on the screen as a bunny. But, what he doesn't know doesn't hurt him. But there's these great opportunities to embed you as the user into the games and into the stories. And I think that's a great opportunity with mobile. Scaffolding is one of these really tough things to do in games because there's the model of just like stop, provide corrective feedback. There's nothing else going on in the game at that moment other than like you need to learn this important thing. Or there's models that are a little more playful and allow the user to experience things as it goes. This is from Motion Math, and basically it's a game where you're tilting the iPhone back and forth, and there's a ball falling. And you want to put the ball on essentially a number line of where represents what it's supposed to be. And so here, you would want it to fall around here. But if you make an error, the first time it just gives you a very general, try this way kind of thing. The second time you make an error, it divides the number line into the quarters. And then the next time, it labels everything but the spot where it belongs. And then if you keep making errors, it's like, here, put it here kind of thing. And that's it doesn't stop the forward motion of the game. It's very playful. It's there. It's supporting the user. And I really love to see these other models. It doesn't work everywhere. It's not right for every educational situation, but it's definitely a nice opportunity when you can take advantage of those other options. Similar to that, this is the kind of educational assessment that parents are often used to seeing, right? It's about, here's the progress that you've made. The child's gotten 3 out of 5 correct. It's very just rudimentary, and it's not contextualized really. It's well, what does this mean? Should I be worried that they missed 3 of the last 5? Is it a good thing, a bad thing? What does this mean? And there's other playful ways that games are doing things, providing feedback on how they're doing, that are really neat opportunities when you start thinking about what they could mean for education. And so if you take like Trism, which was beautiful in its design of the achievements, you could put that kind of framework onto educational games and start thinking about other ways to encourage playing the game. Plants vs. Zombies is another great example. The achievements in that, you're still playing the same game, but they've put other frameworks of how to play that game that challenge you to look at it in unique ways. And I think there's some great opportunities with education and mobile in that space too. Cooperative play and collaboration, another great opportunity. And I generally talk about it using new Super Mario Wii because of the 4-player option. Granted, not a mobile game, but the cooperative aspects of that game, of playing that together as a 4-person team, is incredible because it forces you to have conversations. Not always very positive, you may be griefing each other, but it's one of the few that is just so well designed. Left 4 Dead is another one that actually we talk about a lot in kids space, not as encouraging kids to play Left 4 Dead, but that in the cooperative design of Left 4 Dead, they did it right? It's about communicating, it's about requiring a team to actually finish the tasks. It's about letting different people take the lead at different times based on their skill sets. And so that's something I think we can all take advantage of and try to achieve in the game design space, especially around kids. It's really important, though, to model the behaviors for them wherever possible. If you're anything like me, you tend to be kind of dominant in playing games like this. And so if you think about a bunch of 7-year-olds together, one is probably going to lead the way, and the rest are going to probably be forced into just listening to the dominant person. Dance Central. I love this game. I'm going to play this video. It's been played like a million zillion times on YouTube, but it's just so awesome. How am I doing on time? I'm okay, right?
Roll them, let them hit me, raise it, baby, stay with me. Looking intuition, play the concert, face the stars. And after he's been play the one that's done his part. I'll get him high, show him what he's got. I'll get him high, show him what he's got.
So, it's online, you can watch it. Now you'll have a little Lady Gaga in your head for the rest of the afternoon. But I love this video because Dance Central was not made for kids, or for little kids, right? For the age of kids who are still wearing footy pajamas, right? Not the target audience. And many, many, many of these games, if, like, the Kinect is clearly not tracking 7 little bodies running around the living room, right? It's probably just given up. It's like, whatever, it's still just going, But it hasn't punished them, right? Think about if you're playing Rock Band and you're like totally screwing up. It's like fail, shuts down, it's over kind of thing. Dance Central was like, whatever, keep playing, enjoy the music, dance, it's fine, it's all good. And for kids, that was a brilliant design because it allowed them to be successful in a very accidental way. It was just like, hey, have a good time. And that's, if there's nothing else we do for kids, it's to give them a good, positive experience with technology. And those kids are going to have like very happy association both with like technology, but also Lady Gaga, because of their experience of being able to play this game. And so it's something they did totally accidentally, but they did it right, which is really a great thing. It also just means, though, when you're doing multiplayer, it's pretty chaotic, and so who knows what's going to happen in your code. Also, one of the things we're finding with kids' games that are very physically active is that we need to build in breaks. And so this is, there's Rosita's Jump Count, and then this is from Ready, Set, Grover, which was a Nintendo Wii game that we worked on. And basically, there was all sorts of activities where, like, you were jumping. The kids could jump to 100, but we had to put in breaks every 20, because those kids would, like, jump until they passed out if we would let them. And so we need to take responsibility for a little bit of their health and not always knowing that there's somebody around to stop them and just give a little bit of pacing to things. Role play is another big factor with kids, and Toca Boca is, like, totally rocking at building some really nice tools for just collaborative play and social play. So Toca Tea Party, incredibly straightforward iPad game simulation tool to allow kids to play together. They suggest actually playing with your stuffed animals, but we've seen tons of kids who are actually playing it together and having really nice experiences. And then there's also just this great opportunity in kids' games to do what we call the wink wink games. And so there's Monster Meter, which is nothing else, but it puts this great little overlay on your camera as you like spin it around the room, and it will like point out monsters. And so I could turn it on here and like scan around, and it'll be like, hey, there's 5 monsters in the audience. And there is a 0 monster safe mode, where then if you're using it at bedtime, you can make sure that no monsters show up, because somebody was smart in designing that app. And it's a great tool. And somebody was really, really smart in putting it together. The one thing I will say is the big challenge with this one is this big old button right here is causing a lot of concern with this app, as it does with Talking Tom and the Smurfberries. I'm sure we've all heard about the Smurfberry stories with kids. And so with in-app purchases, the one thing we do really recommend is putting in gates. I realize in-app purchases are a reality, especially for all of us as we're trying to monetize apps for an audience that, it's 99 cents. Like, the chances of seeing the costs back are really tough. But we also have a responsibility to the user. And so we're starting to see some of these really interesting models, like Elmo Calls. There's actually, you tap on this and then you slide it over. And that at least helps. There's been some criticism that kids learn the slide gesture, and so they're still getting through it. There's like squiggly lines and all these other kinds of things. So just being thoughtful and at least attempting to put something in, as well as helping parents understand how to turn off in-app purchases in general, or how to require the password. There's a lot of like Band-Aids that have been put on the situation that parents just don't always understand what's going on there. So, as I said, you can email me. I'm happy to send you the summary document. Email is there. We're on Twitter. We've got a blog on KidScreen. Happy to talk. Have a couple minutes for questions, maybe?
Yeah. Thanks, Carla, for those great insights and all that wonderful information on developing games for little ones. So we'll take some questions from the audience. If anybody has any questions, please raise your hand. We'll bring a mic over. Any questions?
Yes.
So kids have very small hands. There's a lot of games that are designed out there for adults that might on the iPhone that the kids want to play, but they can't because their hands get in the way, right? So what games have you seen that really do a great job of mixing the two together for a user interface?
Yeah. So a lot of the like Angry Birds, Gravity Maze, Country Jour, like there's a lot of those that are just like classic casual games kinds of things that have, whether intentionally or not, have done a good job at reaching kids. And I'm trying to think off the top. This is when I tend to pull out my phone and start poking through what I play a lot to think about the interface stuff. But actually, in many cases, like it's the top casual games have actually, with the exception of when it's like a pinch and zoom kind of activity, those often are very accessible to kids with like a little bit of support from parents. I think it's been really fascinating, like even just seeing with Angry Birds, with Where's My Water, that they need a little help understanding that there's more beyond the screen, but they're getting those mechanics really easily and fast. And if you want to sit down and go through my phone with me afterwards, we can look at what else I find.
We have another question back there.
How effective have you seen things such as badging in the world of these particular kids? Is it really a driver at this point for perhaps learning, or as well as maybe continued play?
Yeah, so badges with a preschool set are like whatever. They don't care. They want to play with their characters. And like even collecting to an extent, they're like, their number sense goes up to 10. So I've got 100 stars, means nothing. They could have 1 million. Around 5 or 6, that collecting behavior really shifts and it starts to become a motivator. So if you think about Pokemon, Webkins, like Club Penguin, all of these things where that collection mechanic was part of it, there's a reason that around like 5 or 6, those things become a sweet spot, that's where they start to have that interest and that understanding that they can accumulate stuff of their own rather than just being like, I want to play with the characters. I want to have a good time and play with my friends.
Hi, I'm going to ask maybe a not so popular question, but only because you mentioned our responsibility towards the users. Of course, there are these apps that are educational, etc., these games, but we know that a very large portion of these games are very flashy, not so diverse in terms of development of cognition, and at worst, very addictive. What is kind of your relation to that conflict, and maybe for us as game developers, as parents, I don't know.
Yeah. It sucks that there's people who are running around making like stuff that they're claiming is educational, and then there's a lot of us out here who are doing really thoughtful design. And it certainly is a struggle. The thing we think about is wherever we can, we are additionally providing an educational service to parents, to teachers, to caregivers. We're running an outreach campaign. Parents need education as much as the kids do in how to use the games and the activities. And so the more that we can provide resources to them as part of our marketing campaigns, the better. And so that's where you see a lot of, especially like the educational grants, that outreach part is really important because it is about how do you get these out into the field with an understanding of how do you use these things. And then there's just, it comes down to marketing from there. And it's about, for us, it's also about cultivating the relationships with the reviewers, so groups like Parents' Choice, Children's Technology Review, any of those where parents are going for information, and so making sure that they're seeing the best of the best. And so we have great relationships with many of those reviewers, and we help pass along games when we hear about the good stuff.
Yeah, though obviously the conflict is when the education part is limiting the children to just not spending so much time.
Yeah.
That's
I mean, the moderation, the whole moderation thing, I mean, it's about having a healthy diet of games, The same as it's bad to eat 5,000 calories in a day. It's bad to exercise 18 hours a day. Like, it's about moderation. And so that's part of what we also try to help parents understand and how a game fits into the larger part of the day. So.
Okay, there's time for one more question. I think there's one in the back.
Who's tracking the long-term cognitive and user interface ramifications that these new devices and kids are doing? I know lots of people are doing research on it, but who, in your opinion, is doing the best research?
I mean, longitudinal stuff is really hard to find right now. There's a couple of data sets that, like one I just used in my dissertation that started collecting information on kids in '97, and so those kids are now just in the 12 to 18 range. From the most recent data set, and so there are some opportunities there to start looking at like time spent gaming, though not even specifically at what kinds of games. It's still really incredibly hard to be looking at what kinds of games. There's some really great research coming out of a number of different places though right now that there's yes, I have some resources. I'm trying to think if there's any in that. Otherwise, yeah, I'm happy to share afterwards. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you, Carla.
Thank you.